Welcome to our Equity in Action Grant information session. My name is Adam Peterson. I am Assistant Dean of Undergraduate Studies at CSU San Marcos. I'm also the chair of the CSU Student Success Network Advisory Board. Welcome. We have Iqbal Atwal here today. I'll let him introduce himself. He's going to be monitoring the chat and hands and everything like that. So Iqbal, go ahead.
Thank you, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us bright and early Friday morning. Very happy to have you guys on board, and I will be supporting with Q&A with chat or anytime you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. We want to make this interactive and help answer all the questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So here we go. We're going to start today with, as we always do with our network meetings, with a native land acknowledgement. The CSU Students Network is housed at the Insights Center at Sacramento State. And so we read Sacramento State's land acknowledgement. Sacramento State acknowledges with respect the land our campus is on today was and continues to be the homelands of the indigenous people of this area. The Nisenan, specifically the Nisenan, Powhatan, and Miwok. The larger Sacramento area and its rivers serve as a gathering place for many local tribes from the surrounding valley and foothills, including the Southern Maidu, Patwin, and Wintun. Sacramento State recognizes these lands and riverways as unceded traditional territories of these native peoples. We further recognize these California Native nations and respect their sovereignty. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm the university's commitment to build relationships and foster a university environment of success to better serve Native nations and communities. I encourage you to reflect on your own native land acknowledgement for your own campus. My campus, San Marcos, is on the traditional homeland of the Luiseño Pamucuisham people. Please do that over the course of the day. So a lot of you are familiar with the network, but there's probably a few of you who aren't. And so we'll do our quick little intro. What is the Student Success Network? So we're an independent network developed by faculty, staff, and administrators from across the state, all about the CSU. We are really trying and have been for the last 10 or 15 years to bring campuses together to try and figure out what we can do for our students. How can we get our students to be as successful as they possibly can? And we focus that work a lot on the people who are doing the work of student success, on middle leaders at our campuses. We define middle leaders very broadly, but we are all working in this interesting environment on our campuses where we lead work for students, and we have to direct that work. We have to figure out how to make it work for our students, but we also have to make it work for the people who report to us, people who are doing the work. We also have to make it work for the people above us. And being in the middle is an interesting and complicated situation. The network is built around this idea of how we support each other and as middle leaders. So we really want to try to make connections as strong as possible. And we have lots of different activities that can do that. Please visit our website. There's all kinds of things going on. This is a very busy month for the network. Not only do we have our grant, our Equity in Action grant open, this is also the time for submissions for Middle Leadership Academy teams. So this is not the day to talk about the MLA, but I highly encourage you to check out the website, go and think about participation in our Middle Leadership Academy. So for today, we always go over our conversational values for the network. This is how we lead meetings. This is how we lead any sort of facilitation, whether it's in person or online. We make sure to acknowledge one another as equals. We are sure to stay curious about each other and the individual past that brought us here. We want to make sure that we slow down to have time to think and reflect. I will be rushing through a lot of this, but then we'll have a lot of Q&A at the end. So that's the think and reflect time. We want to make sure we practice self-awareness, make sure that when you are speaking about yourself, and be generous with each other, mindful and impact on others. We do expect things to get messy. That's just what happens when we all get together, when we do this work. Work with people is messy. We want to respect confidentiality of what's shared here. We're not going to go publish a lot of this. We're recording this session, but we actually will turn it off for the Q&A, the recording. So the Q&A is all open. And then one of the most important things for the network, this is something that we talk about a lot as an advisory board, and also anytime we get together, we recognize that no one knows everything, but together we do in fact know a lot. And that, in fact, is the entire basis behind the Equity in Action grant program. We'll talk about that in a second. Just real meeting notes. Go ahead. You can keep your video off the main session. If it's on, it doesn't matter. I can't actually see anybody. I'm sorry. I just see my screen. So raise your hand. If you have a question, go ahead and it's okay to jump in and raise your hand and ask. You don't have to wait until the Q&A. If there's something that just needs clarification that's on the screen right now, that's fine. And then you can also, of course, use the chat. And again, Iqbal is watching that, so go for it. Okay, real quick, just an agenda. We did our welcome. We're now moving into the overview. This is hopefully is only going to take about 20 minutes, and then we can spend the rest of the time in Q&A. And so don't feel like if you don't have any questions, you don't need to stick around. That's fine. If you have questions, then that's what it's for. Okay. So our EIA grant program. This is actually the second time that we've done this as a network. Our first cycle was in spring 22. In spring 22, the network sent out just around 386K over 20 awards. And so it was a lot of little small awards. So they were between 10 and 20,000 these awards. And so it was a lot of different campuses. 13 different campuses were awarded. Some of them got multiple submissions. My campus, in fact, got 3. So what we wanted to do is try to have these small grants that spread across the system. And you can actually read all of the individual grant reports at the website there. So each of the PIs was tasked with writing a grant report that we publish on the website. Pretty soon, maybe even by the end of the day, we have a full Equity in Action impact report for the whole grant, for our whole first cycle. That's going to be coming out. Maddie says, in fact, it is up now. And so you can visit the website and read that report. There should be some interesting information in there. I would like, if you are attempting to, if you'd like to submit, especially if you submit from one of the campuses that has gotten an award before, go ahead and read through your campus's projects that have gone this before, and reach out to those people. Check in with them, see how their submission process went, see how their project went, see what they're doing now. I think that that's really important to reflect on what successes have already happened. For this particular cycle, we're looking at about the same level of funding, but we're going to split it up a little bit differently, and I'll talk about that in a second. Our program goals are mostly the same, though. And so what we're looking at for the 2026 cycle, we want to try and support efforts that are going on in our campuses that we know everyone has had shrinking budgets over the last couple of years. There's a lot of good work that's happening that's where the funding has sort of dried up. And so what can the network do to try to support some of that work that is really, really working on campuses, but is running out of their funding? So we want to support current efforts. We also want to make sure that we're supporting pilots. What kind of new efforts, new ideas do people have that can close equity gaps and that can improve student outcomes? So we're looking at some pilot work too. The last 2 points are overall things for the network. We want to contribute to a knowledge base. Like we said, we publish those grant reports on the website. They're going to help you as you think about submitting, but they're also going to help us in the future think about what kind of good work is going on at these campuses. What kind of innovative projects are other campuses working on? If you have an idea about, let's say, embedded tutoring, that was a San Diego State project for the last Equity in Action grant. So you can go and read theirs. You can go out and reach and contact those people to find out what did they learn about embedded tutoring over the course of that pilot. What did they how successful was it? What were some of the challenges they faced? So this is contributing to the knowledge base. And we want to make sure that we are also, this is something that the network tries very hard to focus and think a lot about. We don't just, we love to celebrate the things that work well. We love to highlight the things that work well. We also want to make sure that we're learning from our challenges so that we can continue to move forward as a system, as individual campuses, and as a network. We want to make sure to let you all know it is perfectly fine if your campus wants to submit multiple proposals. We are going to try to spread the funding out as widely as possible. And so it's probably unlikely that we're going to fund a campus more than once in this particular cycle. And I'll talk about that in a second because uh, we have two different funding tracks this time. The first cycle in 2022 was all about small grants, 10 to 20K. We do want to continue that idea. We would like to see submissions at the 10 to 20K level. We're calling these pilot projects. These are what we're looking for when we talk about new ideas. What kinds of new things are you working on? What kind of new ideas do you have that really just need that sort of pilot funding, that kickstart funding? Um, these are again the smaller awards, 10 to 20K. We're putting the sort of the time limit there on 24 months, but really we're looking at next academic year. What are the kinds of things you want to be able to do in the next academic year that can really that can really benefit some students? And so that's the pilot project level. We are also accepting submissions at what we call the scaling projects level. And these are aimed at success and equity projects that have been running on your campus. And they have been running for not necessarily several years, but enough time that you've demonstrated some success with them. These are things that are working on your campus, but require some extra funding either to expand or possibly to scale up to reach more students. Whatever you need to do to try and do this sort of idea of scaling. And so these awards are 50 to 100K. We are not going to be able to give out a lot of these. I will warn you in advance. So this is going to be a pretty competitive process, but this is sort of a longer timeline. We're thinking this is more like 2 academic years, and so this is a bigger pot of money. This is something maybe that you'll be able to pay some more people with, whatever it needs to do to make sure that you're continuing that idea and moving it forward. We also, as a part of the application, we identified 3 things that we're really looking for. And so, in the same way that a federal grant will have competitive priorities, we are stealing that language, and we are also going to have competitive priorities for this particular grant cycle. And so, we're going to offer bonus points in our scoring rubric for these 3 things. And so, it doesn't have you don't have to meet one of these competitive priorities. You can meet as many of them as you want. So they are, the first one is cross-divisional collaborative projects. And so really what we're looking for with this is your project cross-divisional? Does it bridge a gap between academic affairs and student affairs in your division, your finance and administrative services division, and your student affairs division? Whatever you need to do to bridge gaps across function and division on your campus. So, for example, does your project have something to do with activities in a classroom and then support outside of the classroom? And are those coming from different offices, from different divisions? Are we getting people on your campus to work together? That's really what we want to focus on for this. Number 2, we want to make sure that we're giving extra points for any multi-institutional projects. So if there are 2 campuses that are working together on something, that's gonna give them bonus points. We also consider it multi-institutional if it's a CSU and another educational institution. So if you're working with a transfer partner, if you're working with a local school district, something as long as they are educational institutions, that's what we're looking for. Something that is moving forward access and equity in your region. I think that's what we're looking for multi-institutional projects. And then number 3, does your project give funds directly to students? If so, that's going to give bonus points. And so there are lots of different ways to give funds directly to students. It can be through stipend. This is also including any sort of student employment that we can fund through this project. So those are our competitive priorities. Some quick funding details. These are general operating funds. This will come through an IFT to your campus. So basically, we will Sacramento State will be sending this funding. It's general operating funds directly to your campus, and it becomes your campus funding. And so all general restrictions on general operating funds apply. So we can't just do anything we want with the money. Whatever your campus's rules are in terms of general operating state funding, that is our restrictions. So those are the overall restrictions. These are not subject to indirect costs, again, because this is an internal competition. This is internal state funding. So this is not subject to indirect. Some additional restrictions, which aren't technically additional, but I'll just say additional restrictions, just we wanted to highlight. So faculty and staff salary, we don't want you to be putting faculty and staff salary on the scale on the pilot projects. It's only 10 to 20K. You can't really do a whole lot of salary work with that much anyway. And so we're just going to say literally the amount of paperwork you have to do that is a whole different source of money. And so like let's just say faculty and staff salary not allowed for pilot projects. However, it is allowable for the scaling projects. That's enough money where you can pay someone. That's enough money where you can buy out a faculty member. Um, so that's the level of funding where we're going to allow faculty and staff salary. Again, this is general operating fund, so it's your campus rules. Student salary is allowable for both. I would love for us to pay students more, but as a general rule, we don't pay students that much, and so they actually do fit under this under the pilot project level. So student salary is allowable for both. No travel on this. Again, this is general operating funds, but we want to make sure that this is used in the clearest way possible. So we're not allowing travel on this funding. No gift cards. That's again a state fund, a general rule for state funds. Providing funding to students should be through employment, stipends, scholarships, something like that, not gift cards. And we can't do gift cards for research incentives. And then just a general rule, please remember, stipends and scholarships, they do impact financial aid, and they do impact taxes. And so we don't want you to, write a budget that says we're going to give all this $20,000 directly to students and not think about it again. Remember that it does impact them. Even if you're trying to give them free money, unfortunately, it does impact their financial aid. So make sure that you talk to your financial aid office about what that needs to look like and the best way to do that. The funds themselves are by default will be transferred in July. We're gonna move the funding. The awards will be in late April, but the funds will be transferred in July to push the funding into the next fiscal year that starts in July. If you need it faster, we can be a little earlier. And so that's just by request. So default is going to come in July, but if you need it sometime earlier, it's not going to be too much earlier than June. But if you need it in the previous fiscal year, we can do that. But you need a test. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the submission real quick. This is it may look like a very complicated submission process. We're really just asking a number of questions. And so this is not an onerous application. I don't want anyone to be worried about the weight of this. This is a relatively easy application compared to something like a federal grant, even compared to like a private grant. This is relatively simple. So all submissions will come through our online form, and each of these things is its own section in the form. And so all of it will go through there. You can put it all together in a Word document and then just sort of copy and paste it into the form as you do it. The first thing is project outline. And so what we're looking for the project outline is pretty simple. We want to see your goals and objectives for the program. We want to know what your activities are. We want you to explain that, obviously. That's kind of important. We want to know what your timeline is for this, how you want to do this. And then what is the level of institutional commitment? What is your campus providing here? So we are providing some funding, but what is the commitment from the institution? This number of staff is going to work on this. This number of students is going to be involved in this. Whatever the commitment from the institution is. If you are applying for one of the scaling projects, we are also looking for a statement of evidence that goes in your outline section. And it can be a little longer in that case. And so again, for the scaling projects, are looking for projects that have existed on your campus, that are running, and that have some level of success. And so how do you know that your project is working? What evidence do you have to share? Doesn't have to be real detailed. We don't need very complicated data. We just need some level of evidence that this idea has some merit and is working towards student success and equity. We would like you to provide a statement that shows your project's alignment with the CSU Student Success Framework. And so the Student Success Framework is relatively new. It's been sort of publicized officially since the fall. but what we are trying to do with this, this is going to be relatively good practice for you as you submit this. Your campuses are going to ask um, for this level of alignment with the student success framework in a lot of different ways. You're going to have to get used to this. This is the new, this is, sort of our new GI 2025. And so what are we doing on our campuses that align with this work? Now, we do this for a couple of reasons. Number one is that we actually, at the network, we really actually like the student success framework. We think it's pretty well put together. The idea that the chancellor went out and did this listening tour for 2 years or so to put together this framework means that a lot of it is built on the work that is being done on individual campuses. So it none of this alignment should be difficult. All of the work that you do is pretty well aligned with the framework already, but we want to make sure that you are describing it in the language of the framework, because I think that we think that you're going to be asked that a lot. And so we want to make sure that we're practicing. How are we making sure that we are using the language of the network to describe this project? And so what we're going to ask is that you should connect and you should align with one of the five strategy areas for the framework. So that being cost of attendance, advising and pathways, teaching and learning, streamlined experience, and skills and networks. And so I want to pull this away real quick. And I want to make sure that we're looking at the same thing. Okay. On the Chancellor's Office website, calstate.edu. So if you go to Google and type Cal State Student Success Framework, this is what will show up. This is a page on their on the impact section of their website. So this is the opening page for the Student Success Framework. We want to make sure that you are scrolling down to the bottom and go to strategy details. The strategy details are the things that we really want you to focus on connecting with. These are the pillars here. This is under here, the framework in action. This explains and uses the language that they would like you to use for each of these pillars, the cost of attendance, advising and pathways, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the language that we want you to make sure that you're aligning with as you do this. Again, this is good practice. We think that this is going to keep happening as we get further into the implementation of the framework. Okay, go back to the thing here. Okay, Iqbal, shout at me if you don't see the right thing. I will keep going.
You're good.
Okay. All right. We also want to make sure that you provide a statement that aligns your project with the Student Success Network. This is pretty easy. How does your project align with our purpose and vision? You can go to the CSU Student Success Network webpage, csustudentsuccess.net, and click on About Us. That will lead you to the purpose and vision statement. You can adopt that language there. Just make sure that we're aligned with the network. All of the work that you do, I can guarantee aligns. So we're practicing modifying our language to make sure that this fits. If you are trying to hit one or more of the competitive priorities, we are asking for a statement there. We want to make sure that how does your project meet one or more of the competitive priorities? Please include all of them in one statement. So if you are hitting all three of those, just make sure that you're describing that in this one statement. This is not real complicated. If you're telling us that you're paying students, you're paying students. We're not going to second guess a whole lot there. The sustainability statement is something that we're going to spend a little time on. What we're going to ask here is for you to consider two separate questions in this short little 500-word statement. How will the efforts or the outcomes of your project continue to address goals beyond the grant period? So basically, once the funding runs out, once this particular funding runs out, what is the sustainability plan? Like, how is this going to continue without this funding? That can be, you can be talking about how you're going to get the institution to support this. How are you going to get extra funding? How are you going to make sure that this idea continues after the grant period? And then within the grant period, how can you plan for any sort of turnover of your PI or any other personnel? This is something that we added to the grant application after after our first cycle. We found in a lot of cases over the course of 2022 to 2023 to 2024, there was a lot of turnover in staffing, and especially at the middle leader level. And so a lot of these some of the grants, I guess I won't say a lot of the grants, but some of the grants were left in limbo because the PI left and didn't tell anybody about it. This funding is just sort of sitting there and nobody knows too much about the project. And so, how can we make sure that there is a succession plan? Not that we think you're going to leave, but what is sort of the plan for any sort of turnover? So make sure to include that in your sustainability statement. The evaluation plan, relatively simple. Again, we're intentionally limiting this to only 500 words. We do not need some kind of very, very complicated assessment plan that is for your internal purposes. We just want to know how you know it's working. I want you to think about short-term and long-term outcomes and how you're going to measure them. Evaluation is relatively simple. Again, I don't need a very detailed assessment plan. Just something relatively simple that thinks about outcomes and measuring them. Your budget, this is again intentionally limiting this to only 250 words in the application. We just need a simple outline. We don't need a spreadsheet. We just want you to tell us how you're going to spend the money. Again, you'll be able to request you kind of like a federal grant. If something happens and you need to change something, you just let us know, and we will and make sure that we can track if there's any major budget changes. So don't worry too much if there's something that's sort of up in the air. Just tell us how you're going to spend the money. That's all we're looking for. The letter of support. Over on the right there, I put this in quotes. So what we're looking for is something that acknowledges the project from your supervisor, or if it's a scaling project, a little higher than that. We'll talk about it in a second. It does not need to be a letter of support or endorsement. We just need acknowledgement. And so this does not have to be a formal letter. We don't need it to be on letterhead. It doesn't need to be 3 pages long that's written by you and has the provost's name on it. It's just a letter of acknowledgement. And so it can be a copy of an email. You can write up your project in an email, send it to somebody, and just say, like, we're going to send this in. Is that okay? And if they write back YES, just send us that. Just give us a copy of that email. That's fine. Again, we're looking for acknowledgement. For pilot projects, that can be an administrator with some level of oversight over the project itself. So that could be at the dean level, an associate VP in student affairs, somebody like that. If it's a scaling project, we do want it to be a cabinet level executive. Again, this is a good chunk of money that's going to come into your campus. We want somebody at the executive level to acknowledge that this is happening. Again, they do not have to support or endorse it. It'd be great if they support or endorse it. That would probably help you. But what we want more than anything else is acknowledgement. We want this to be as easy as possible for you to receive. And so don't think it has to be some kind of complicated form letter. Okay. Real quick, the review process and timeline. We have a grant review committee. It is a subcommittee of our advisory board. So we're going to have 9 members on this committee, 3 Ed Insight staff, and 6 advisory board members. You can see the campus is there. One of them is me. And so the idea is to have a big committee so that we can, in fact, recuse ourselves. My campus will probably be sending in an application. I will not read the submissions from my campus. Anyone from their own campus will not be voting on or providing their opinion on the submissions from their own campus. We made a big enough committee so that we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. And so we also made a big enough committee so that every application can be reviewed by multiple people. We want to make sure that it's not just one person scoring everything. We're probably going to have, I hope, again, it depends on how many submissions we get, but I hope we have multiple reviews per submission. And so our committee will meet shortly after the deadline, which is March 27th. I'll talk about that again in a second, So shortly after our deadline to distribute the proposals, we'll meet again twice to do scoring, and then awards will be announced. We will hopefully make those decisions in mid-April, and then awards will be announced in late April. And again, funding will be by default at the very beginning of next fiscal year, so July. And again, if you have summer activities, if you need to start things up pretty quickly, then we can get it a little faster. I would not expect the funding uh, before June, though. Okay, the submission deadline is the 27th. Okay, that's not too long from now. It's 21 days. The official deadline is 5 p.m. Um, So please get it in before 5 p.m. Again, this in relative terms, this is a pretty light application. Many of you have applied for grants before and have, you spend 6 months putting together a submission. This is relatively light compared to those. We also want to make sure this is something that we're trying very hard to do with all of our network activities. We want to make sure this process is open. We want to make sure that this is open and transparent as possible. Iqbal and I are available for questions. We're going to have our Q&A right now so that you can go ahead and ask what you need to. But I am also happy to meet with you and talk about your proposal. If you want to do this, we're going to make sure that every single proposal gets like actual written feedback. We want to make sure that whether you get the award or not, we want to make sure that this is an inclusive process. We want to make sure that people that have never applied for grants before are, feel comfortable asking questions about the process, and doing whatever they need to do to feel comfortable to submit a really good proposal. And so we want to make sure that your proposals are as good as they possibly can. So if you have questions at any time in the next 21 days, you can reach out to me, can reach out to Iqbal, can reach out to the main network address with questions, and that will get routed in the direction that it needs to go.